right. Well, thanks for coming out. We're really excited to be here. If you read the boilerplate that I put together for the website, this vision came together as what's promised to be a throwback to the beatnik days without the bongos or the clove cigarettes. I'm really happy to be joined by some musicians that I'm happy to call friends, but I also know as brilliant musicians, period. John Madoff, Aaron Bajakian, and Matthias Hunsley, all of whom live and play in New York. I've seen them play, I've written about their music, and I asked them to join me in this adventure, and they were game. So what we're going to do is each play our wares a little bit, but we're going to engage in some genuine improvisation. I'm here to read a little bit from a memoir that I published this year called Please Talk About Me When I'm Gone. And I'm going to read later on from an upcoming novel that I hope will be out later this year. I'm going to step out of the way from time to time and let them play, and they're going to join me as I read, and some other things might happen that we don't even know about yet. So without further ado, thanks to the Tea Lounge for letting us be here, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This is a chapter that's called Please Talk About Me When I'm Gone. The love of art means loss of real love. I didn't say that. Although that's the sort of thing I might say, since I'm the sort who feels obliged to quote the books I've read, and I allow art to remind me how to relate to myself. Some people sometimes choose to make their lives more complicated. Life sometimes decides for them. Sometimes life gets there first. To win, to lose, what for if the world will forget us anyway? I didn't write that. A poet wrote that. I'm no poet. Poets are always looking for things, such as heroes. And who wants to be a hero these days? Who can afford it? The world could be, it might very well already be, full of folks who will ring changes and do their part to shake up the constricting and crazed institutions that keep us chained, bound, and complacent. There are lots of these people, I'm sure, tons of them. But the thing is, most of us are too busy trying to live. It's enough just to survive without seeking to pursue such lofty, such poetic propositions. This is the new poetry. The more things stay the same, the more they change. Here's our art. Haikus of horror in the cities, sonnets of sin and corruption, limericks of deregulation, free verse, free trade, rhymed lines of laissez-faire, and the emboldened ghostwriter death, forever at work on our collective life stories. These days we look for poetry in all the wrong places. Some of us even believe we're gazing more deeply into the murky waters of existence, and all we're actually seeing is our own reflections. And so, I think, a life is not unlike a poem. Too often eager to please, predictable, safe. I think one should therefore feel obliged occasionally to ask some complicated questions, such as, what am I doing to keep things interesting? How can I generate momentum and keep the narrative flowing? Listen, when some of your best friends are people who exist elsewhere, characters in books you've read, musicians you'll never meet, people from the past who died decades, even centuries before you were born, or people you knew intimately who are no longer around, it might be time to ask some complicated questions. Who are you? That is, or should be, the first question, as well as the last question, and it should be asked as often as possible along the way. You see, all men are islands. After all, no one else is inside you when you're born, no one's going with you when you die, and between those first and last breaths, the decisions, actions, and accountability are your own. All yours. And so, you seek solace in yourself. You find friends. You learn to discern redemption through the aimless affairs that comprise the push and pull of everyone's existence. You realize, in short, that you're going through it alone, so you should never go through it alone. You can't run away, and the further you run, the closer you get to yourself, and you're all you've got. If you're fortunate enough to figure this out early on, you find friends, the real ones who exist in your everyday world, and the other ones who've been there all along, the ones you can always turn to, whoever or wherever you happen to be. Please Talk About Me When I'm Gone. That's the title of this memoir. It's also the presumptive title of any memoir. More, it's the unwritten title of any work of art. the desire to have those thoughts and feelings articulated, read, understood, appreciated. More still, it's the often unexpressed message of any individual life. We want to be discussed and loved and celebrated long after we're no longer around. Mostly, we don't want to be quickly or easily forgotten. So when you hear voices or find yourself talking to people you're not sure that can hear you, you should cut yourself some slack. We've all been there or will be at some point. We've all on occasion looked at the clouds and wondered if there was a kingdom beyond the skies, the place some of us were told our dearly departed looked down from. Haven't we all taken comfort from a one-way conversation we forgot to be self-conscious about? Aren't we all at times unable or unwilling to entirely abandon the idea that someone else is listening? And so, you talk. And maybe someone listens. Anyone might be listening up there, and that's more comfort than anything you could ever find in a church. You talk. Say something. Everything. Say anything you need to say in order to survive. Who knows but that on the lower frequencies, I speak for you. What he said. And then to lighten it up for a second before I turn it over to the musicians, the memoir talks about my family's experience seeing my mom through her 5-year battle with cancer, which she ultimately lost in 2002. So the antagonist of the story is cancer. The protagonist is probably my mom, and the cast of characters are myself, my father, and my sister. And the tension of the relationships obviously compromise a pretty large part. And I use the memoir to kind of interrogate what made me what I am, which is equal parts mother and father, which is probably the case for all of us. So this is a quick scene talking about how my father did and didn't shape me. He had never found himself or allowed himself to imagine his father revealing a lack of control. He'd never known his father to cry, even at the funerals of his own parents. Over time, the son had taken for granted that his father was at once inscrutable and incontrovertible, an entity that precluded explanation. In other words, even as he embraced so many of the assumptions and illusions most adults successfully grapple with at some point, he had scarcely ceased to view his pops from a child's perspective. His father, he'd figured out many years before, was a piece of work, even for an Irish Catholic of his time and place, post-Depression Boston. Over time, it had become obvious that the only perceptible distress he'd ever betrayed was the possibility of actually revealing an unguarded emotion, any sign of weakness. "You've never seen your father cry?" a girlfriend had asked a few years before. "No, I never have," he said, deciding to tell the truth. She hadn't believed him. "I'm serious," he insisted. "But how is that possible?" "Well, he's old school." "That's just weird." "Well, we're not an unweird family. The rest of you seem pretty normal." "You don't know the half of it," he said, deciding to tell half the truth. "So, if your father doesn't cry, what does he do?" I mean, instead of crying, does he show no emotion at all?" "He's Irish." "Well, what does that mean?" "He can do anger and silence. He even allows himself to be amused sometimes." "But what about, like, when he's upset?" "He's Irish." "Well, what does that mean?" "He keeps it locked up in there." "In there?" "In the vault." "The vault?" "You know, inside." "That's just weird." "I don't disagree." "You cry." "Of course I do. I'm my mother's son." "So your mom cries." "She's Italian." "You're a disaster. You cry during movies, not even sad movies." "You don't know the half of it." He did cry during movies and conversations. He often cried alone, especially when he listened to music, and not even sad music. "So," you might ask him, "are you really suggesting someone should want to listen to music that's capable of making them cry?" "Yes," he'd reply. "But," you might ask, "why would someone want to do such a thing?" "It's simple," he'd say, "so you know you're alive." So I'm going to do something I've never done in public before. That's read a poem, which I don't think I could do an event like this and get away with not. Fortunately, it's embedded in the memoir, so it's kind of a cheat. This was inspired by an unfortunate circumstance that yielded two positive results, which is had my mom dying from colon cancer means there's a family history, so it behooves everyone else in the family to get a colonoscopy, which I did my first one when I was 32. The night before, if anyone's ever been through that, it's not the most pleasant experience cleaning out the system, and there was the inevitable dread that occurred. But to pass the time in between trips to the bathroom, I somehow wrote a poem in one sitting that I never felt the need to improve upon. So this is called As Opposed to Prayer. Nervous and unnerved this evening, alone, searching for solace, something not unlike prayer. a hope that the past won't repeat itself. Progress, the preemptive strike, this procedure. They call it a procedure when they expect nothing unexpected. Precedents and percentages. Our family has a history, meaning that some part of someone who has died might be alive and unwelcome and somewhere inside. Remembering immeasurable moments, IVs, and all the unpleasant things you can't force yourself to forget. Bad days, worse days, glimpses of serenity, then grief. A flash focus of forced perspective. This too shall pass. Then, inevitably, earlier times. I recall when doctors touched us and dentists handled us with bare hands. Still living then in a past the future had not crept up on. A time when the truth was believable because the only lies that children can tell get told to escape tiny troubles that they've created. And so, I'm uneasy, and it's not even myself I'm thinking about. Frightened all over again for my mother, and I can do nothing for her now, just as I could do nothing for her then. A cycle. She'd seen her own mother suffer, while each of them made their anxious inquiries, appeals, entreating the darkening clouds out of time. Like her son, she eventually became acquainted with the white world of procedures and all that happens, before, during, after, and beyond. Hope and fear, faith then despair, the nagging need to believe in men and the magic of machines, or the things we say when no one's speaking. I'm so scared, she said, to anyone who was listening. I know I was, and we hope that God was. The God who may have done this and a million other things in his austere, always unaccountable way. In the end, she feared the truth, but not the reasons why awful things always happen to almost everyone. Me, I envied the armor of her fear. I understood I could not even rely on those lovely lies about a God I couldn't bring myself to believe in. We were there, a child and the man who brought me into this calculus. We're made in God's image, they say, but it's your parents' faces you see when you look at the pictures and see the future. He said what needed to be said, nothing. And I said what he said. After all, what were we supposed to say? The truth? The truth was this. We too were scared. I'm so scared, she said, and we told her it was going to be okay. We told her we had reasons to believe, and we told her other things when the things we'd already told her turned out to be untrue. We never told her the truth, which was that we were lying. Fear and faith are useful if you can afford either, or fear is free and always lingers longer after it's served its purposeless point, like a stain on the street days later. Dying is nothing to be daunted by. It's living that takes the toll. Living with death, living with life, being unprepared or unwilling to be unafraid when it's finally time to die. I'm so scared, I say, to anyone who may be listening into silence, wondering if they can do more for me than we could manage to do for her. There's no one left to lie to, yet the truth, as always, is immutable. And so, if you're out there, please help me. Help me absolve this dread that no one can hear. And anyone who's spent any time in a hospital can probably relate to this section, which is called waiting room. He waits. He looks out the window and he waits. He doesn't look at the magazine, the one on top of the others that litter the table, the one last picked up by the last person who sat in this room. He stands, not wanting to sit, not wanting to look down at the magazine. He looks down at the magazine, which stares up at him, defiant, disinterested, doing all that was asked of it. The magazine didn't ask to be brought into this room. It didn't ask to be read or ignored, to be picked up and put down, to be digested and then discarded. He stands, knowing if he thinks about the magazine he wishes he wasn't looking at, the magazine he won't read, he won't think of the things he doesn't want to think about. He doesn't walk into the corridor to look in the room that his wife is not in. He waits. He understands. Anyone who's been where he is understands. You must prepare yourself to wait a long time. So you prepare, and you wait. And then, It's even longer than that. Longer than you remember, much longer. He remembers standing, then sitting in this room, almost the exact same spot, twice already. Third time's the charm, he doesn't think. And still, he can't help being surprised at how long he's had to wait. He waits. No one talks to him. They knew who he is and why he's here. And no one knows the story he could tell. It's the same story everyone who stood where he's standing will tell. He stands silently, shifting and sorting his awareness, that eventually they'll bring her to the room. When they bring her to the room, he'll see her. He'll see her seeing him, then see her seeing him see her, and then she'll ask him and he'll have to tell her. He'll try not to tell her, and she'll look at him and remind him that he has to tell her. He waits. He wishes they'd hurry up and get it over with. He doesn't say. And then he hopes that they'll never come so he can stand, peacefully paralyzed in this infinite moment. Eventually, he looks at the table on the magazine that waits for him to pick it up. He doesn't pick it up. He sits down and doesn't think about the nothingness that surrounds him, the nothingness around him, and the gnawing nothingness inside him. He doesn't notice the plants or the paintings or the cheerfully colored curtain that doesn't cover the light outside. He doesn't allow himself to contemplate the sterile silence screaming all around him, the vacant spaces and the odd energies of dying life. Most of all, he doesn't think about it, how impossibly clean people in impossibly white clothes, speaking impossible to understand languages, using impossibly powerful tools and technology, do everything they can, but they still can't keep it from occurring. He finds himself staring again at the magazine that he's picked up without realizing it. He doesn't open the magazine that, under normal circumstances, he did not have the slightest inclination to read. He doesn't open it and therefore does not, among other things, learn about which foods would improve his sex drive and help him sleep more soundly. He does not find out ways to make his partner reach new levels of ecstasy every time. He does not peruse his horoscope to see what the future has in store for him. He does not discover the secret to losing 10 pounds in only 3 days. And he does not skim the interview that explains how the fragile millionaire singer lost the chance of making millions more dollars after having a nervous breakdown while filming a commercial for a soft drink she'd never otherwise endorse. He waits. He doesn't pass the time planning opportunities that could create happiness. He doesn't deceive himself this time about the possibility of forgetting the present by focusing on the past. He doesn't dwell on the types of things that they would enjoy doing again, the things they enjoyed once, which they never found the time or forgot to do again. He doesn't think about the ways in which you discover the things you love then become the things that bring about inexplicable sorrow. The movies, the music, the meals, the books, the board games, the photo albums, the family. And so, he doesn't allow himself to think about her as she is now, or how she was then, or how he is now, or how he was then, how he will be. He looks down at the magazine again and picks it up again. He understands that the second he opens the magazine, they'll arrive, wheeling her down the hall like the enigmatic magicians they were trained to be. If he opens the magazine, the magic act performed again before an awkward audience will begin again. So he waits. He stands up and looks out the window at the horizon, beginning to disappear in the heavy air beneath the tops of the trees. He looks down far below where miniature people inside miniature cars sit in miniature rows, stoically and slowly moving forward in the directions of their miniature houses and the miniature respites that may or may not await them. The sky continues to sag, ensnaring the world in its unspeaking century. The people and then the cars and then the earth all slip away, leaving only lights that sigh stoically, bearing witness to it all. He looks down at the waning waves of lights, and these lights do not look like 1,000 sets of eyes. They do not make the darkness more discernible. They do not appear as poetry. They're exactly what they are. Their progress, their pain, their power. They're the cold logic of machines that control the lives of the men who made them. He doesn't let himself think about these things. He has too many other things to not think about. He does not turn around. He will hear them eventually when they come. Eventually they'll come and he'll hear them. And then he has to turn around. Then he looks down again at the magazine he won't read. He knows again that if he picks up the magazine, they'll come. He sits silently and stares at the magazine. He stands and looks out the window. He does not turn around. He waits. So one of the themes that resurfaces throughout this is it being a memoir, some of the things that helped me get through a tough time. And I can say, and I do say, that music definitely has always been kind of the alpha and omega. And so it's particularly meaningful to be up here with these guys who have genuinely made music that has helped me through not really that many difficult times, but has made a difference in my life. So it's an unbelievable honor to read this section of your presence, because it is in part dedicated to you guys. And it's called Bright Moments, which is dedicated to, of course, the great Russ on Roland Kirk. Question: what's it all about? Answer: I don't know. But I do know a few things. I know some of the things that make me tick. Even though I write for fun, for real, forever, I'd still say that music has always been the central element of my existence, or the elemental center. Writing is a compulsion, a hobby, a skill, a craft, an obsession, a mystery, at times a burden. Music simply is. For just about anyone, all you need is an ear or two, and it can work its magic. But as many people come to realize, if you approach it with your mind and your heart, and eventually, inevitably, your soul, is capable of making you aware of other worlds. It can help you achieve the satisfaction material possessions are intended to inspire, and it'll help you feel the feelings drugs are designed to approximate, etc. This is what music signifies for me. As a dedicated non-musician, I use this art as a viable source of empowerment. While it remains first and foremost a very real and easily identifiable source of extreme pleasure, it's also a vehicle, something I use to get someplace else, a stimulus that demands a response, inexorably capable of conjuring up words and concepts and constructions such as spirit, soul, God, karma, things that are rightfully almost unbearably oblique or pretentious or all too easily invoked, expedient for folks who ardently need a way to articulate the feeling they either can't quite explain or desperately wish to get in touch with. When all else fails, and all else always fails, there's music. When the emotions and awareness start to squeeze their way behind your mind, giving way to those awful times when you wonder how you can possibly find peace or make sense of anything ever again, music is there when you need it the most. August 27th, 2002 was the first day of the rest of my life. Anyone who's lost a loved one will recall, or half recall, the blur of events that come after, all of which are a blessing in disguise of distraction. I did a lot of driving, from my father's house to my place, from funeral home to my father's place, to the airport to pick up relatives. The sensations would become overwhelming at times, and I struggled through interminable hours where I wasn't even certain what was real or who I was. During one of those episodes, I was coming or going somewhere and I hadn't been paying attention to my car stereo, and then I came to my senses, recognizing a song I'd heard hundreds of times. In this crucial moment, it broke through that haze like the sun and saved my life. I can't count how many times something similar has happened, but it was impossible, or it's possible, I never needed music as much as I did on this desperate occasion. Here's the bottom line. When I contemplate whatever life has in store for me, or even if I allow myself to entertain the worst case scenarios regarding what I could have been or might become, as long as my ears work, all will never be lost. In this regard, I echo the letter of Paul to the Corinthians, which is obligatory reading at every wedding. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I might remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. I feel that, and I don't know many people who would attempt to contradict such a beautiful, irrefutable sentiment. But I reckon, even if everything else was removed from my life, including love, I could find meaning and solace if I still had music. If I'm ever reduced to a bent-down wreck, so long as I have ears to listen with, I'll never be beyond redemption. I'll always be willing to draw one more breath. Take away my ability to write, speak, see the world, smell the air, drink, eat, emote. This life will still be worth living if I can hear those sounds. Which is why I make this request to my friends, family, and the medical establishment. Even if I'm someday in that coma, and every professional would wager a year's salary, there's no possible way I'm able to register anything. As long as my heart is still beating, please, no matter what else you do, keep the music playing in my presence until I'm cold. Because no matter what you think or whatever you're praying for, as long as I can still hear that music, I'm already in a better place than whatever you imagine or hope I'm headed toward. The last piece I want to read from the memoir is toward the end, and it's called Sanctuary. It's a quiet piece. I visited my mother's grave the first several years for the same reason I used to attend church. It was expected. It was meant to make me feel better. It was supposed to signify something. I stopped going for the same reasons I ceased attending weekly services. Catharsis by commission most likely satisfies only those who don't realize the game is rigged, spiritually speaking. Or else they do know it's a game and they wouldn't imagine it any other way. It's not the people with genuine faith the faithless have reservations about. It's the folks who find their faith so onerous or insufficient that it causes them to act in ways antithetical to the precepts they purportedly approve. The historical intersections of culture and psychology suggest that there can be no archetypal way to grieve, just as there are no ultimate answers for how we might reconcile our place in the world. including the non-place we're born and wherever we go when we die. But there's certainly a wrong way to grieve and grapple with the transient nature of existence. Anytime we're encouraged or obligated to follow a path someone else prescribes, particularly someone who's getting paid for the prescription, is a shortcut to resolution that we can only attain for ourselves. Cemeteries are like churches, created to contemplate people not accessible to those living. They serve as memorials, affording an opportunity to ponder this world and reconcile our place in it. I've been to the cemetery, and I don't mind going to the cemetery. From a purely aesthetic perspective, it's a lovingly constructed memento for departed souls. Names and ages and years connected by what all of us ultimately have in common. The cemetery is where my mother's body rests. Any place else I go is where she lived, where she still exists. Wherever I go, she accompanies me. But sometimes this isn't enough. So I return to the lake by my father's house, the house I grew up in, the house where my mother helped raise me, the house where we helped her die. The lake where I once caught sunfish, where I swam and drank my first beers. The lake where I skinny dipped with a girl across the street, not knowing what I'd do without clothes on dry land. The same lake I walked around during those last 2 weeks, my own routine once the August sun began its slow descent and those families sat down to dinner. The only place I was ever alone those last 2 weeks, a respite from crowded and uncomfortable thoughts, a retreat for the inevitable rituals of adulthood. The same lake where my father and I ended up later that final night, after it was over and my sister returned to her family. The lake we silently circled, not saying much, not needing to do anything other than exist. This is where I go. I return to this lake. This is my church, my sanctified place for reflection. The water flows and recedes, feeding and restoring itself. The trees surround the water, their leaves emblems of nature's enduring procession. The sky stares down impassively to see its ancient face, reflecting up. At night, the stars strain toward the earth, fulfilling their preordained purpose. Okay, so I've got a couple of sections from the aforementioned novel that I'm hoping to get into shape by the end of this year. This could be, the novel's entitled Not to Mention a Nice Life, and it could be seen as a commentary on the post-dot-com blow-up, or the pre-recession fantasy, or the post-recession reality, which I think is to say that things continue in cycles, and we probably haven't seen the last of that, which isn't to say this is timeless, I hope. Take a guy. Let's say he's about my age, old enough to own his own condo and pay almost all his own bills sometimes. He was young enough to be unmarried, but old enough to understand he's not getting any younger. Add a dose of fresh alienation, not enough to be unhealthy, of course, but enough to enable him to function in a world full of a-holes, imbecility, and indifference. Take this guy and provide just enough stability so that there's no excuses, but plenty of alibis. Maybe he's estranged from too many old friends, or aggrieved about an absent parent, or perhaps he's just emerging from the wreckage of a ruined relationship. Or, probably, he's utterly average in every regard, except for the uncomfortable fact that, unlike almost everyone else he knows, he's aware of it. Listen, I'm just like everyone else, I think. I work for a living, I like my job less than I probably should. It's not my fault. I drink too much coffee, I don't eat breakfast, I forget to eat lunch, I remember to eat dinner. Oh, I remember. I piss sitting down, I shit standing up, I have nightmares constantly except when I'm asleep. I grind my teeth all day, admittedly in half-assed fashion, because talking, swallowing, and breathing interfere. But then at night I really get down to business. I grind and then dream about grinding, and above all, I have the ceaseless, scary taste of rust in my mouth. I suspect, in short, that I'm dying. I am, in other words, just like everyone else I know. I know. I'm not alone. I have a best friend who happens to be a dog. He's really good for me, reminding me to eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom, generally making sure I get out a few times each day. He walks me whenever he gets the chance. My favorite time is after work, when I re-enter the building and the walls and halls come alive, warm with the savory smells of homemade meals. I can never smell fast food, although that scent lingers in the elevator, as if ashamed to be associated with the honesty, the effort and industry of all these prepared productions. Nobody sits down to dinner anymore, but all around me people are sitting down, eating meatloaf or some sort of roast that's simmered on low heat all afternoon. Maybe there's even a pie prepared for dessert. Maybe inside someone's kitchen, it's still the 1950s. And I remind myself that someday, if my cards play me right, I'll enjoy a real meal around a table and experience all that I've been missing during these efficient years of isolation. I'll clear the table and clean the dishes. I'll sit on the couch and take a crack at the crossword, or catch a made-for-TV movie, or run errands or consult a book of baby names for the offspring on the way. And eventually I'll work on improving my bad habits and attempt to overlook my wife's, those quirks that were so endearing in those early days. I will at last learn to communicate openly and as an adult. Mostly I won't be alone. My dog is a trooper. He's never called in sick a single day in his life, up at the ass crack every day, including weekends, stretched, eager, and anxious to take on the world, or at least take a walk. My dog takes his work very seriously and has succeeded in making more friends than I have. He doesn't discriminate. Men, women, cars, trees, other dogs, especially other dogs. He wants to meet everyone and he patrols the neighborhood like it's job, which of course it is. I can't help but admire this dedication. Thanks to him, I'm on a first-name basis with all the other dogs in my building, though I have a hard time remembering what to call their owners. Take this guy, an older man. I don't want to call him an old man, whose name I've never gotten around to establishing. And I sort of prefer it that way, as he provides me with a mystery I enjoy embellishing each time I accompany him. Where most of my neighbors are obviously what they are, mothers, fathers, bachelors, wives, working stiffs, senior citizens, anonymous law-abiding entities, this man alone retains, for me and my imagination, an enigmatic air. He wears a wedding band, but I've never seen or met his spouse. He's friendly, so much so that it initially took me a while to warm up to him. Maybe this is the way people see my old man. Yes, he's definitely someone's father. He's rolled up his sleeves to punish, praise, clean, counsel, inspire, admonish, argue, approve, second guess, support, and silence. In short, things I've never done. And I think I can't help myself. He's a way I'll never be. All of us, of course, are more or less the same. We live, we work, we sleep, we eat, we love, we fight, we forget. We try to remember, we think, we wear down, and then we die. In this regard, all living creatures are more alike than not. But humans are different. We know who we are, so we wonder. We can't help ourselves. Things like, what has that man done that I'll never do? What has he seen that I'll never see? What parts of the world he once lived in are gone forever, replaced by newer things that younger people not yet born will wonder about in time? I think, if I had lived in the 50s, that man might have been a spy, a professor, a pedophile. I would have called him a pervert, a recluse, a con artist, but above all, he most certainly would be a communist. If I had lived in the 50s, I'd eat an egg for breakfast each morning with either bacon or sausage or sometimes both. I would eat pastrami sandwiches, drink whole milk, and smoke endless streams of cigarettes. I'd be his father to as many children as God, most certainly a capitalist God, saw fit to provide. I'd live closer to my parents. I'd miss church service seldom on Sundays and never on holy days of obligation. I'd know how to fix my toilet and sink if they dripped. I'd never have had a shirt professionally pressed. I'd drive an American car, never wear a seatbelt. I'd have a job that I could actually describe in 1 or 2 words. I would, quite conceivably, be content. My dog is content. One thing's for sure, if my dog had lived in the 50s, he'd be content, just as he'd be content 50 years from now. After all dogs want is other dogs. I think my dog thinks I'm a dog. People aren't like that, which I suppose is why people love dogs. I and the older man love our dogs, and for a few seconds we watch them sniff each other. Hot enough for you? Yeah, well, it's the humidity. To ourselves we say this. Then we go our separate ways, exchanging pleasantries. I say, have a nice day. Likewise, he replies, and then smiles. Not to mention a nice life. I smile and then walk away, still smiling. Who the hell does this guy think he is, saying something like that? How dare he say something like that? Unless he means it. No one says something like that, unless they're actually inconceivably content. I'm still smiling, and then a sobering thought sideswipes me again. This man is a way I'll never be. still have hangovers, thank God. Everyone who's known an alcoholic knows that as soon as you stop feeling the pain, it's because you're no longer feeling the pain. You're no longer feeling much of anything. And so I welcome the horrors of the digital cock crowing in my ear at an uncalled for hour. I'm grateful for the flaming phlegm in my throat, the snakes chasing their tails through my sinuses, the smoke stuck behind my eyelids, the shards of glass in my gut, and the special ring of hell circling my head. Because if it wasn't for a handful of my least favorite things, I'd know I had some serious problems. All of us can think of a friend whose father, or mother for that matter, we came to understand was in an entirely different league when it came to the science of cirrhosis. The man who falls asleep fully clothed with a snifter balanced over his balls, then up and out the door before sunrise, like the rest of the inverted vampires who do their dirty work during the day in three-piece suits. Maybe it was a martini at lunch or several cigarettes an hour to take the edge off. Whatever it was, whatever it took, they always made it out, and they always came back, for the family and to the refrigerator, filled with the best friends anyone can afford. Our friends' fathers came of age in the bad old days that fight it out for posterity in the pages of books, uneasy memories, and the wishful thinking of TV reruns, the 50s. These are men who have never opened a bottle of wine and have no use for imported beer. Men who actually have rye in their liquor cabinets, who still have liquor cabinets for that matter. These are men who were raised by men that never considered church or sick days optional, and the only thing they disliked more than strangers was their neighbors. Men who didn't believe in diseases and didn't drink to escape so much as to remind themselves exactly what they never had a chance to become. Theirs was an alcoholism that did not involve happy hours and karaoke contests. Theirs was a sit down with the radio and a whiskey sour, a refill with dinner and one before, during, and after the ball game. Or maybe they'd mow the lawn to liven things up, tinker under the hood of a car that had decades to go before it could become a classic. Or perhaps friends would come over to play cards. Sometimes a second bottle would get broken out. This was a slow burn of similar nights. Stiff upper lips, the sun setting on boys playing baseball, mothers sitting on the couch watching TVs families didn't yet own, the forced smiles battling bottled tears in the bottom of a coffee mug, of amphetamines and affairs, overhead fans and undernourished kids, of evening papers and a creeping conviction that there is no God, of poets unable to make art out of the mess they made of their own lives. It was a hard time where people didn't necessarily live happily ever after, if they ever lived at all. It was a time, in other words, not unlike our own. they got the best seat in the house right now. So for artistic reasons, I'm happy to say that this next scene happened almost exactly as it is written on paper. For human reasons, it's kind of sad, but they provided some good art. Or I should say good material for art. I'm not saying this is good art. My neighbor, whose name I've of course forgotten, if in fact I ever knew in the first place, and being roughly my age, never objects to and always answers to my irrefutably cordial salutations, which include chief, dude, bro, and the ever appropriate and all-purpose man, is standing outside my door. I can see him through the peephole. Well, I wonder if I should wait to see if he'll knock again. He knocks again. It's 8:30 in the morning. What's the worst thing that could happen? Hey, Byron, he says, embarrassed or anxious or both. At least he remembers my name. What's up, man? I say, not missing a beat. Listen, sorry to bother you. You on your way to work? Yeah, actually, is everything okay? Yeah, listen, do you mind if I come inside for a second? I back up obligingly, resigned to roll with it. What choice is there? After all, I did open the door. He corners me in my kitchen and asks if I know anyone who might be interested in buying a condo. His condo, for instance. Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of people who'd love to live here, I offer. Yeah, I know, but I mean, do you know anyone who's looking like to buy a place? Well, I'd be happy to ask around, you know, put the word on the street and whatnot. Yeah, that'd be cool, I'd appreciate that. He looks away and it's my turn to say something. Is everything okay? Yeah, well, I got laid off, you know, so I'm just gonna move home for a while with my folks, you know, to get my shit straight. I hear you, I say as encouragingly as possible, but that's only half true. I do hear him, but I also hear myself saying, I hear you, as well as the voice inside my head, which is processing the situation and repeating the verdict. Not good, not good, not good. He's sweating, his hands, which seem puffy and pale. I've never noticed what unbelievable meat hooks he has, though admittedly the only times I bump into him are in the hallway as he disappears into his end unit with a case of Miller Lite cans under his arm, McDonald's or some fast food monstrosity in the other. His hands, exhibits A and B, are shaking like the lid on a boiling pot. They're very obviously not obeying their master, and before I have half a chance to put two and two together, he interrupts my internal assessment and looks at me searchingly. Hey man, you got any beer? At 8:33 in the a.m., there's only one possible answer to a question like this. Sure, I say. I open the refrigerator to remember. I bought my last beer last month, which makes me a liar. Actually, I don't, I start, but sense that won't suffice, so I hold the door open and let him inspect for himself, which he does, making us both feel better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. He accepts this answer, but is clearly not satisfied with my response. Oh, I have plenty of liquor if... Yeah, do you care if I take a shot of something? Are you sure you're okay? To myself, I say this. A pint glass is obviously inappropriate, so I grab a juice glass and put it down on the counter, sliding it down to him like a bartender from a black and white western. He's eagerly grabbed my fifth of bourbon, and I tell him to help himself. He pours a generous, bordering on unbelievable belt of booze and inhales it in one quick motion. This is strictly business. To myself, I say this. Better, I inquire, and I actually mean it. I actually want to know. Do you mind if I get another one? Hey bro, knock yourself out, I say, stupidly. He doesn't notice because he's too busy securing the second round in case I try to give last call at the last second. Even the sweat on his forehead seems relieved. Although I know exactly what time it is, I can't help myself from looking at the digits blinking on my oven. 8:34. He looks at me and nods his head, expressing gratitude with his burning eyes. The eyes never lie. Then he snatches a tube of toothpaste out of his front pocket, puts it in his mouth, and pulls the trigger. So if you wouldn't mind asking around, you know, just see if anyone's looking to maybe live here, I'll cut a deal. No problem, I assure him. I mean, I'll hook you up with a finder's fee too. No, don't worry, man, I'm happy to help. Not good, not good, not good. Let me give you a card, he says, putting the toothpaste back and reaching into his other pocket. I'm surprised, in spite of myself, that between the shaking and the sheer size of his hands, he can even fit them into his shirt sleeves. Fuck, he says, frazzled or furious, or both. What's up, I ask. I left my fucking cards in my place. Well, don't worry about it. Let me just write your number down. No, let me run that again, and then you can hand them out and shit. Okay. I wait too long and then go down to get them myself. And on the way I think, gambling debts? Drugs? Both? Drugs. It must be drugs. Whatever it is, it's something I know I want no part of. It's obviously something my neighbor wants no part of either, or we wouldn't both be here right now. I knock on his door. It opens quickly and my neighbor walks out, shutting it behind him. Apparently I'm not supposed to see inside. Perhaps I don't want to see inside. He follows me into the hall. Hey man, I appreciate anything you can do. No problem, dude. I'm happy to help. Listen, he leans in close. You mind if I grab another shot? Sure, man. I've already locked my door on the way out, so I let myself back in, tricking my dog into thinking a full day's already passed. The bottle and glass are still on the counter, forming sticky circles of an early morning crime scene. Do you mind if I pour a stiff one? Help yourself, Chief. You want to take that bottle with you? To myself, I say this. He pours a shot that would give Liberty Valance pause, polishes it off, and then pulls out the toothpaste from his holster. I ask no questions, and he tells no tales. I tell my dog to hold down the fort again, and my dog looks confused or disappointed, or both. I lock the door again and escort my soon-to-be ex-neighbor out. Hey, thanks again, Byron. Okay, man, take care of yourself. And give me a call if you hear anything. Will do. And both of us seem to understand as we go our separate ways that we'll never see each other again, and reach somewhat deflated, probably for opposite reasons. On the way to work, I have a memory that's more like a dream. Newark Airport, that shithole. A place has to be exceptionally beautiful or exceptionally appalling or incomprehensibly pointless in order to be easily remembered years after a brief visit. When I was a kid, I couldn't have been much more than 8. My father and I had a layover at Newark Airport. Even then, I was perceptive enough to understand this was no place I ever needed to return voluntarily. An unassuming older man, at any rate, he was noticeably older than my old man, which made him old, sat in one of those impossibly plain plastic chairs with his pants legs rolled up. It wasn't until we got closer that I realized 2 things. He was alone, and he was scratching at a series of scabs on his shin. For some reason, he looked our way at the moment we passed him, and after sizing us up, he stood and amiably approached my father. Sir, did you need someone to help you and your son carry your bags? No, thanks, we're okay, my pops replied, looking ahead and picking up the pace. The man was persistent. In the space of 15 seconds, my father denied him 3 times, and my emotions slid from appreciation of possibly having someone carry my suitcase to the vague, uneasy sense that my father was being somehow rude, a jerk, to the unsettling awareness of recognition. I sensed something I'd seen plenty of, but never before in any person older than myself. Fear. I saw it in his eyes, and I felt it on my insides. As we walked away, my old man waited until we were at a charitable distance, then looked at me meaningfully and offered a somber assertion. That's as low as you can go. I asked him to elaborate, as was my style, and he was either unwilling or unable to add anything, as was his style. It wasn't that I didn't understand what he was saying. I understood him perfectly. It was because I understood him that I needed him to say more, to talk to me a little longer about it, about anything. Anything to interrupt the silence and the sudden thoughts that had accompanied it. It's easy to believe that people like this exist for our sakes. They're dying lessons on how not to live, warnings of what could happen if you weren't careful and found yourself scratching at scabs in the world's ugliest airport. We forget, or we don't allow ourselves to entertain the idea that these people have histories, that these shadows and signposts don't happen to serve a purpose for anyone else. They were once actual people themselves. I realize now my father was wrong about one thing. That's not as low as you can go. You can go lower, a whole lot lower. But perhaps it's more disturbing to see the ones that are on the way down. It's somehow easier to accept the ones at the bottom of the ocean. It's the ones who are sinking, who are still within reach, who are drowning noisily in front of us, who sometimes have the temerity to ask us to hold out a hand. These are the ones we can scarcely tolerate, because every so often we look at them and see ourselves. supposed to follow that up. But, uno más. I'm gonna end on a light note, and then you guys can pick it up a notch or bring us down, or both. This is a scene that takes place between the protagonist and his friend Whitey. You'll learn to love it, Whitey says, and while I'm not a gambling man, I feel certain this is a bet he'd lose. I drink too much and exercise too little, and based on what I see all around me, I can't figure out if I should feel grateful or dejected. Grateful because half the people I see are disgraceful. Tomato jowl, fatzos huffing and puffing their way to a first heart attack. They're dressed identically, khaki slacks and double extra large polo shirts that are all still 3 sizes too small, tucked in so that they're guts, marvels of sheer mass, spherical monsters poised to attack or at least make a break for it, restrained only by those tireless belts, heroically strapped in their holding patterns, can do everything in their power to hold gravity hostage. The other half are the opposite extreme and cause me to question why I can't summon the desire to stop treating my body like a temple of doom. These carb-counting, cardio-conversant, protein-shake-pounding members of the Bionic Boys Club. These are the men who have nursed crushes all their lives, but are only now almost ready to commit and confess to the world how much they truly love themselves. The kind of men who had sex with their wives and felt like it was an act of betrayal. Men supremely confident to grow mustaches without irony. Men who wash their cars more often than most people wash their sheets. Men who never heard a compliment they could not improve upon. Only in one place could one find so seamless a pairing of extremes. The golf course, obviously. Wow, I say. This is even worse than I imagined. You better get used to it, like he says. How do you figure? You better learn to love it, because this is where you want to be anywhere. If you want to get anywhere in this business. In this business? What business do you mean? The asshole business? Hey man, I'm just telling you like it is. So what's next? You're telling me I need to fuck my boss to get promoted? You should be so lucky, he says jokingly, I think. If only it were that easy, he adds, jokingly, I hope. Whitey, please do me a favor. What? Say something that doesn't make me want to beat the shit out of you. I'm serious, dude. This is how business gets done. Business? Doctors, lawyers, businessmen. Deals get closed on golf courses more than offices. As is too often the case with Whitey, I can't help but wonder if there's a book somewhere that people have to read in order to spout this kind of stuff, or if it's simply the result of assiduously avoiding reading in the first place. Hey Whitey, have you ever heard of H.L. Mencken? Who? Never mind. Did he win the Masters or something? Not exactly. Look, if you want to get with your colleagues and have them trust you, you got to do it out here on the links. This is how you bond with the big boys. How the fuck do I want to bond with any of them, I don't ask. I only need them to trust me as far as they can throw me, I think. If you say so, I say. I know so, says Whitey. He's right about one thing. Everyone plays golf. I was almost surprised when I discovered that our CEO and the rest of the honchos couldn't be bothered to blow off 6 or 12 hours every week. Then again, they're too busy probably playing with money to goof around with golf. They're too busy buying golf courses to play golf. Myself, I usually sleep on Sunday mornings. Everyone else, it seems, is either on the golf course or at church. As far as I can tell, I haven't been missing much. As far as I can tell, golf affords grown men the opportunity to accomplish 2 things. Get out of work, or if they're married, out of the house on weekends, and drink beer. Not that I'm necessarily opposed to either activity, but I usually don't have to dress up like a frat boy from the early 80s to make it happen. And I certainly don't have to shell out $60 to ride around in a cart and occasionally jump out to whack my ball into the woods or in the water. Couldn't we at least have bought some good beer, I asked? You have to bring cans, he explains. That way you can cram them into your golf bag. We could always not drink, I don't say. You learn to love it, I offer. You don't love it? I used to love it, then I got better. So, now I'm good enough that I hate it. Oh, so it only gets better from here, I sigh. You'll see, he smiles. Here's the real kicker. A lot of these dudes will get up while it's still dark outside so they can squeeze in a semi-quick 18 holes before heading into the office. I can't fathom it. And yet, I have no option but to admire that level of lunacy disguised as dedication. Myself, I feel pretty confident that if someone offered to shovel money in my car, but I had to show up before 6 a.m., I'd happily hit the snooze button a few more times instead. It's already getting chilly in the mornings and early evenings, so I wonder what these sportsmen do with themselves during the winter months. Sleep? Watch TV? Get to know their children again? Anything, I reckon, rather than spending more time at work. And on that score, finally, we find some common ground. Look at, Whitey says, iron in one hand, can of awful beer in the other, unlit cigarette dangling. This is America. Reluctantly, I have no real choice but to agree with him. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, John Madoff, Matthias Hunsley, Aaron Bajakian. I'm Sean Murphy. I appreciate you coming out. I had a blast. I hope you did too.
I'm sitting on the edge of the chair at this point.
Wait, what?
He's sitting on the edge of the chair. He's like, fucking what's it's too. Oh my god, what the That's hilarious. I haven't seen that shit in a while.
Second to last jam, that was unbelievable.
That should have been the last jam.